Session starts in 5. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the keynote with afrimapr at USAR 2022. My name is Peg Duthie. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be helping to run this session. Your speakers today are Anelda van der Walt, who's also presenting on behalf of Andy South. She's with Talarify, and he is with Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. With Talarify, Clinton Colacosa with Malawi Liverpool Wellcome Trust Clinical Research Program, and Nono Gay at Louisiana Tech University. This session is brought to you in part by Oracle, who's gold sponsor for the conference, and we would like to now to share a message from them.
At Oracle, our customers are diverse, hailing from around the globe. They have a wide range of needs and skills for data management, data analytics, and application development, whether that's in the cloud or their own data centers. Customers not only store their data in Oracle Database, but also realize the benefits of a wide range of included analytics technologies, such as machine learning and spatial and graph analytics, all integrated in the converged Oracle Database, supporting applications with broad requirements. And while Oracle certainly supports coders, even non-coders can take advantage of low-code and no-code user interfaces to build applications, analyze data, and perform machine learning modeling. Having access to machine learning directly in the database speeds time to insight, supports scalability, and simplifies solution deployment, while keeping data secure.
For machine learning in Oracle Database, users choose among APIs in R, Python, and SQL, 3 of the top languages for data science, along with access from REST endpoints. Oracle's been a long-time active supporter and contributor to open source R. As a founding member of the R Consortium, we recognize and appreciate the valuable work of the R Consortium and the R Foundation to support and grow the R environment and R community. Like so many, Oracle believes it's important to give back to the R community, which provides powerful tools with a rich and thriving ecosystem. You may have heard of Oracle Autonomous Database, the enterprise-class self-driving database that helps you be your most productive. Managing your database has never been easier or more cost-effective. Enterprise customers rely on Oracle Database for security and availability, as well as scalability and performance, to process data at unprecedented speeds and volumes, to extract value in real time. Data scientists, ML engineers, data analysts, and developers leverage the converged database to simplify solution deployment, enabling applications throughout the enterprise, including on mobile devices. Autonomous Database already supports SQL and Python APIs for Oracle Machine Learning, and coming soon, we'll be enabling Oracle Machine Learning for R on Autonomous Database. Being able to work with your database data from R for exploration, preparation, machine learning modeling, and solution deployment, and even extend core functionality with third-party R packages, provide a powerful combination. So with Oracle Machine Learning for R, you can process data, build models, and deploy solutions within the database environment while leveraging the Oracle Database as a high-performance compute engine. We know many enterprises love that. We hope you will too. Please stop by our virtual and have a great time at USAR.
Thank you, Oracle. And now it's time for the main show. Take it away, Anelda.
Thank you very much, Peg. I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that you can see it. You see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So, good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear R colleagues. For me, it's afternoon. For you, it might be morning or even evening. I want to start off today by thanking the Use R 2020 Organizing Committee and people who know about our work for the invitation to join you here today. I also, of course, want to thank Oracle for sponsoring our keynote and participation in the event. I'm really privileged to be sharing the virtual stage with great colleagues of mine today. And over the next hour or so, we'll be taking you on a whirlwind tour of our experiences as collaborators on an art project that kicked off about 2.5 years ago. We are not going to spend much time on introducing ourselves, but our slides do include short bios and contact details for all of us. So if you want to reach out afterwards, you're more than welcome, and we will also share the slides. We embarked on this project with ideas of what we wanted to accomplish, and we achieved various objectives. We failed at some, but most of all, we learned about what it means to work on an open source project in an emerging region. In some cases, we will offer ideas about how to do this better. In other cases, we realized that it may be time to step back and do a proper investigation into building communities for practice, especially taking into consideration the effect of COVID and the increasing amount of opportunities to participate and learn through online resources and events. So without further ado, let's embark on this journey. My dear friend and co-project lead, Dr. Andy South, whose brainchild afrimapr was, is unfortunately not able to join us today. So I'll do my very best to talk on his behalf, sharing our perspectives as project leads. In 2020, the afrimapr team set out with funding from Wellcome Open Research to develop open source R code and educational resources to help make mapping in R easier as part of routine analysis in Africa. Over the course of the 2.5 years, we were lucky to receive additional funding via different streams of Wellcome. Very soon, we also realized that we needed to add a component to our project related to community building, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in today's talk. This slide shows what we had in mind originally. We wanted to string together bits and pieces of data and code that makes routine analysis easier. These recipes, prototypes, and templates could then be shared with analysts in Africa to make their work easier and more efficient. With collaboration and feedback, the building blocks could be improved over time. Things kicked off with a bang with our first draft package released shortly after the funding was made available, and our first conference talk 2 months later at SAT Days in Johannesburg, South Africa. That was also the week that COVID arrived in South Africa, and 4 days later, COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. And you can see that was very, very early on in our project. Over the course of the next 18 months or so, we continued to work on package development, but since we were unable to run the full planned in-person workshops, it was very difficult to get input and feedback from the community, and our project changed its approach a bit over this time. This slide shows some links to our GitHub repository where one can find our packages and other resources that is under development. And there are also a number of Shiny app prototypes and online as well as offline educational resources related to mapping. All our examples make use of open African datasets that's been put together as a package, as a data package to support the further development of learning resources contextualized to Africa. And Anne will talk about our learning resources in much more detail later on. One of our proudest outputs is the peer-reviewed article where we evaluated the accessibility and quality of open health facility lists for African countries. This was done at the same time, at the prime of the COVID pandemic, when everyone was wondering how to access health facilities and how the vaccine would be distributed. The article includes an interactive visualization to support further investigation of the datasets. And excitingly, the WHO recently launched a project around the development of a global health facilities database that should address some of the issues we described in the article. As part of our community building initiative, we started running monthly virtual code walkthroughs, mostly related to making maps in R, but sometimes including other community and capacity development activities as well. Along the afrimapr journey, we met Clinton Kolokosa, a geospatial analyst in Malawi who is doing remarkable work with data visualization in R to help inform public health policy and provide a better understanding to combat vector-borne diseases in Malawi. And I'd like to hand over to Clinton now.
Thanks, Anelda. I'm Clinton Gogosa, a Wellcome Master's Fellow, affiliated with the Malawi River Wellcome and Gambia's University of Health Sciences. So my learning journey, like most young Malawians, has been a bit frustrating and yet highly rewarding and exciting. Just a year ago, I had a vague knowledge of how to use R in geospatial statistical analysis. Fast forward to 2022, I am part of a vibrant R community in Malawi and Africa. I've published an award-winning R Shiny app, and I can develop my own functions and spatial models in R Markdown. So for the next few minutes, I just want to share my experience as a young Malawian researcher and R enthusiast. So my work as a geospatial analyst in training essentially involves inspiring and informing decision makers, epidemiologists, entomologists, the wider research community, and the general public in Malawi about public health, climate change, and everything in between. Specifically, I explore the environmental drivers of vector-borne diseases using map-based and data-driven resources made using open source tools and coding platforms such as RStudio, RShiny, and QGIS. I work under the excellent support and mentorship of brilliant local and international researchers from the Malawi River Wellcome and Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. To mention a few, Dr. James Chirambo, Dr. Chris Jones, Dr. Michelle Stanton, Dr. Janari Samsaya, Dr. Juran Tanjena, Professor Russell Stothard, and Dan McDermott. So one day, I'm mapping malaria cases, health facility catchment population, and the habitats of malaria-transmitting mosquitoes, identified using satellite and drone images to reveal whether clinically confirmed cases can be explained by nearness to water bodies. Next slide, please. Another day, I'm analyzing satellite imagery and humanitarian data to assess the flood situation and estimate the number of affected people. Next slide, please. The next day, I'm mapping and plotting some national COVID-19 cases in Malawi to promote country-specific COVID-19 analytics and healthcare misinformation. When COVID-19 reached Malawi, I took it upon myself to provide accurate and detailed information on the pandemic spread to fill the information gap that still exists today. And to embellish my work, the COVID-19 dashboard emerged as the winner of the 2020 Mapping Horizons Just competition, run by the International Association of Young Geographers. Next, I then communicate the results using contemporary data visualization tools to get the message across better. So essentially, my job is to keep the policymakers and the public informed and inspired. Informing is the easy part. Could we return back to the previous slide? Thank you. As an example, this dashboard, simple as it is, has inspired the Malawi Ministry of Health and various research groups at the Malawi River Wellcome to connect and work together in developing work packages for building climate resilience in the delivery of health services during weather disasters. So currently, plans are underway to develop an early warning system that will enable vigilant climate and health hazard responses by the Department of Climate Change and Meteorological Services and the Digital Health Information and Disaster Management departments. Now, to bring all these projects to completion, I must be connected to people and the internet. And this not only presents challenges, but also exciting opportunities to build organic relationships, upskill, and stay up to date. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah, great, thank you. Now, in terms of the opportunities, I have experienced firsthand how using R in helping make a positive change can open doors for excellent opportunities. And I can't emphasize this enough. For instance, last year I was rewarded for my work in geospatial science when I was awarded a prestigious Wellcome International Masters Training Fellowship to pursue a Master's in Geographical Information Systems at Sheffield Hallam University in the UK. This not only shows that doing something meaningful with deep purpose can be rewarding, but also that people, opportunities, and simple tools can put someone on a path of progress and success. In terms of the challenges, some of the main obstacles faced in my line of work include the confinement of locals to minor roles, scanty country-specific data, and locally developed ARA resources. So generally, data access, completeness, and currency are a big obstacle. For instance, getting complete and up-to-date fine-scale public health and environmental data for Malawi is quite difficult. This is because most of the data for Malawi at local level is outdated, not in digital form, and not publicly available. So that means researchers and data analysts must spend more time and resources to access or generate the data. I remember while working on my malaria project, I had to generate my own health facility catchment boundaries because the already available data was way outdated. Now, I think this is where collaboration becomes useful. If, for example, researchers have good connections with others doing similar projects, they can benefit from data sharing agreements, or at least get pointers to where they can access the data that they are looking for. For instance, in my case, I shared the code and data on my GitHub repository, and I was happy to see the code being used by postgraduate students at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine who were investigating grammatic drivers of malaria transmission in central Malawi. And for many young Malawian researchers and ARA users like me, getting support from local ARA gurus on their ARA journey can be quite challenging. For instance, my recent grant application to develop a country-specific COVID-19 package in for Malawi has taught me to value highly the support my mentors, supervisors, and network provide. For instance, I would reach out to potential collaborators who are into our package development and epidemiology, but get no response at all. Getting no response means no rate of support, no submission of application, no application, no grant, no experience, no career progression, and no career progression, no leadership position. So in the end, one is confined to minor roles. Once, while attending one of my research group meetings, I listened to a senior researcher who was lamenting how hard it is to get responses from fellow Malawians via emails. Yet, when the same message is sent by someone from outside Malawi, the responses are quick. So I think this is one of the reasons why it is important for emerging ARA communities to be looking inwards and reflecting on their growth to see if they are not hindering local talent. And perhaps another reason why international collaborators and funders should not bypass local structures and local people. So I'm learning to be grateful for the helping hand that the impartial senior researchers provide. I am particularly thankful to institutions, researchers, and other communities and experts who have and are working tirelessly to open the doors of career progression to early career African youths, both males and females. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to sidestep and overcome some of the challenges I've just mentioned, I think the first step should be us acknowledging such challenges, not dismiss them as trivial. We can't address problems who have not accepted that they exist. And then we can work on creating an enabling environment to fuel sharing of innovative ideas and development of those ideas into cutting-edge ARA resources that will meet the needs of the modern times that we're in. And as demonstrated by the admirable collaborative afrimapr project, I, for one, believe that having improved our abilities to use and develop R in far-sighted ways, realize the value of locally developed R resources and the power of local collaboration, purposely work towards making more meaningful contributions to the R community, and nurtured and harnessed the exceptional young African talent, we will transcend these challenges and be drivers and shapers of exciting ideas and new R resources. So at this point, let me invite Dr. Annie to share with us her valuable insight and some of the success stories and lessons learned from our admirable afrimapr journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clinton. Hi, yes, I'm Anne, and I'm going to present to you briefly from a training and community organizer perspective. Next slide, please. I will firstly briefly discuss the training materials we have in afrimapr. Most of our teaching at afrimapr has been done using online tutorials that we have developed using the interactive R package called LearnR, and also using a package that is part of the afrimapr project called AfriLearnR. And this package contains our tutorials to teach spatial data skills in R with African data. And we have 4 interactive tutorials as listed here. And these are Introduction to Spatial Data, Get My Data In, Joining Spreadsheet Data to a Map, and an R Mapping Crash Course. And I'm briefly going to describe each of these tutorials. Next slide. So the Introduction to Spatial Data tutorial introduces spatial data types in R, as well as the packages SF, TMAP, and raster. And the tutorial uses data from our data package called AfriLearnData. Next slide. The Get My Data In tutorial demonstrates getting spatial data of different types into R. And the aim of this tutorial is to support learners in getting their own data into R before making maps or other plots. Next slide. The Joining Spreadsheet Data to a Map tutorial. This teaches how to plot data onto a map. So, for example, a use case could be if your data only has names of regions or places and no coordinates, then how you can then plot this data onto a map. Next slide, please. Lastly, the R Mapping Crash Course tutorial goes straight to the endpoints of our other tutorials and provides the code to create maps that learners can then experiment with. Next slide, please. So in the teaching of our afrimapr materials, we take accessibility and inclusivity very seriously. And we take this into account when designing tutorials or teaching sessions. And we always look at ways where we can improve in this area. So for example, we ran a 4-hour interactive tutorial at the Use R conference last year in 2021, and this was titled Entry-Level R Maps from African Data. And the accessibility and inclusivity considerations that we took into account included languages. So we needed to take into account the languages spoken by participants, as there are many different languages that are spoken in Africa. The original afrimapr training materials, as I've shown, are online as interactive tutorials using the R package LearnR. But we were concerned about the potential for these online tutorials to crash if there were too many people that tried to access them at one time. We also needed to take into account the diverse level of skills that attendees had, as well as internet and connectivity issues that may be experienced by participants. Next slide, please. So some solutions of how we tried to overcome these challenges included, for the languages, we offered the tutorial in both English and French. I'm not going to go into the language challenges in a lot of detail now, as Nono is going to cover this in a few minutes. But we realized that there are many, many more languages spoken by attendees, and we recognize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of local languages spoken in Africa. But at least for now, with this tutorial, covering at least English and French made the tutorial a lot more accessible than if it was just given in English. We had 2 teaching rooms on Zoom, one for English and one for French. And both of these rooms had instructors and helpers for each language. All the course materials were available in both English and French. And we also sent our pre and post course surveys in both English and French. And next slide, please. To address the concern of the potential for the online tutorials to crash if too many people tried to access them at one time, we chose to rather run the tutorial in RStudio Cloud, and this worked extremely well for us. and we customized and adapted our tutorials for a 4-hour session on RStudio Cloud. All our teaching materials are open source and downloadable, so attendees could also work through them locally on their computers if they preferred, or if they had problems with RStudio Cloud during the tutorial. Also, as the materials are open and available, participants could also work through the lessons afterwards in their own time, and we were open for them to contact us with queries if they had them. Also, the benefit of using RStudio Cloud is that participants did not have to install R or RStudio or any R packages locally to be able to run the tutorial. Slide. To address the different skill levels of participants, we sent out a pre-course survey, and this was a few days before the tutorial, and this informed us that we had a broad range of skills and experience using R, from complete beginner to advanced. And this is tricky for any tutorial or workshop, but we addressed this firstly by just being aware as a teaching team that we had this broad range of skills in terms of how we approached our teaching. We also offered extra breakout rooms where individuals could be given more focused attention by helpers if required. And attendees could also ask questions in the Zoom chat or in a shared document that we compiled, where helpers could then go and help them there and answer the questions. As I've already mentioned, all the materials are open source and downloadable, so attendees could work through them afterwards in their own time. And again, contact us with queries if need be. We were very open to that. And the afrimapr Learn R tutorials are also available online for people to work through in their own time. As far as internet and connectivity is concerned, again, this is often a problem for many tutorials or workshops. We made attendees aware beforehand what they would need to be able to attend the tutorial in terms of bandwidth, for example. And also, as I've mentioned, the benefit of using RStudio Cloud is that participants didn't have to install R or RStudio or any R packages locally to be able to run the tutorial. And again, the teaching materials could be downloaded, and participants could use these to work locally, either during the tutorial or in their own time afterwards if they had technical difficulties. And we were also open to helping them with queries afterwards if they had these. Slide. To understand the attendees' experience of the tutorial and to inform us for the design of future tutorials, we sent out a post-course survey, and we as a teaching and organizing team held a debrief meeting after the tutorial where we discussed what worked and what didn't, and these lessons learned could then inform us for the design of future teaching sessions. Slide. All in all, the tutorial worked extremely well and we received excellent feedback. It was a fantastic collaborative effort by a great team and is one of afrimapr's success stories. For example, the teaching materials have already been used by others, including, for example, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the Africa CDC. Slide. In 2021, Public Health England used our afrimapr 4-hour tutorial as part of training for the Africa CDC. And in 2022, based on participant feedback, afrimapr materials are now incorporated into a 6-day R for Epidemiology course in the Future Learn online learning platform. Also, afrimapr is joining the team going to Ethiopia to teach in person in July 2022. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Nono.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nono. I'm a professor of economics at Louisiana Tech University. Next, please. I'd like to start with this extremely important statistic. About 64% of all resources on the internet are in English. Next, please. And this is where the statistics come from. So there are only about 26% of internet users who speak English, but 64% of websites are actually in English. And since I'm going to be focusing on French here, if you look at the French statistics there, all internet users the French speakers among all internet users are about 3.3%, but only 2.5% of websites are actually in French. Next, please. These statistics are just here to let you know that English dominates anything that you can think about. In the business world, and there are so many examples, the translators that are hired or interpreters that are hired in businesses mostly translate from or to English. In the world of education, most textbooks are written in English, and English is taught in all educational systems around the world. If you are in research and science, the most prestigious scientific journals are in English, and only very few non-English journals are considered high quality. In technology, same thing. All programming languages are actually English, with words like if, for, then, else, and sometimes English terminologies actually do not have any translations in other languages. Next, please. And I would like to point to your attention the fact that language is a very ignored source of exclusion. The term inclusion, which is a term that is very often used nowadays, is defined as the act or practice of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded. And what we see generally is that race and gender are the basis that are used for exclusion. However, language is a very prominent one. However, it is very intricate and expensive to be language inclusive. An example I'd like to give here is in the United States, for example, the driver's license test can be taken in many languages, including, of course, English, Spanish, French, and many other languages. Next, please. There are many local languages that are spoken in Africa, as Anne mentioned earlier. However, the countries in Africa have official languages, which are usually from the colonization period. And as you can see here, French is the language that is used as an official language in the most countries in Africa, with 23 countries. English, 22, Arabic, 11, Portuguese, 5. Next, please. And over here, I'm graying out the English bar just to show that there are many countries in Africa that use a language other than English as their official languages. So this is definitely a very big target that we should have as a community, the non-English speakers. Next, please. And on this slide, I show you the very interesting dynamics of official languages in Africa. So as you can see, the blue area it represents the countries that use French as an official language, and the yellow area represents the countries that use English as an official language. Now, the red area, which represents countries that use Arabic as an official language, that area is actually very interesting because it shows us that there is no country in Africa that uses Arabic exclusively as an official language. So half of these red countries also speak French, the other half also speak English on top of Arabic. So the resources that are made available in English, also benefit half of the Arabic countries. And if there were more resources made in French, they would, of course, benefit the blue area by half of the red area as well. Next, please. And there are many encouraging examples, actually, of many people or organizations that are doing great efforts to try to reach out to those French-speaking communities. So the first example on the left is a Slack channel for French speakers with very prominent people in our community. You may actually remember some of them on the list that I provide here. There are actually many other prominent members. And afrimapr, as Anne mentioned earlier, the tutorials in user 2021 were given in French and English, and the material was also translated in French and made available to everybody. These are very encouraging examples. Next, please. There's an R and Tidyverse book written by Julien Barnier. It's a wonderful book. If you are a French-speaking person, this is a book that will interest you. On the right, Charles Baudet, who's also from France, writes very technical R tutorials, which he hosts on his website. I actually owe him the fact that I have been able to host many shiny dashboards that I made on AWS, thanks to these tutorials. Next, please. And so outside of the French world, you have Our Ladies Global Community that sometimes have meetups online, which are completely in Sibili, their language. And on the right, you have a Spanish translation of R for Data Science, which is a very encouraging effort as well. Next, please. So, as far as French is concerned on the continent of Africa, there are many hidden opportunities, especially because there are around 300 million people speaking French in Africa. And this is an opportunity to apply what is known as the Blue Ocean Strategy, which is something that you may know. The Blue Ocean Strategy is an award-winning book which was published many, many years ago. The idea is if you swim in an ocean that has many sharks, all the sharks are going to bite off each other and they will bleed and the ocean will turn red. So if you are operating in a highly competitive industry, you are basically in a red ocean. So here, the authors of the book are asking people or encouraging people to go to a blue ocean. So that's an ocean where you don't have too many sharks. In other words, an industry or a field where the competition is very low so that you can enjoy success. So making materials, making courses, books in French, when it comes to Africa at least, is a blue ocean strategy because almost nothing has been done there. Next, please. And it's not too difficult to do that actually, because we already have everything we need. R is already an open source platform and it is accessible. We have a very fast growing community. We have dedicated R users who are consistently producing resources like blogs, books, packages, and videos. And in this user base, we have many talented multilingual R users already. So we already have everything that we need in order to flourish. Next, please. So my call to action then to those of us who are R users and multilingual as well is to be intentional in trying to make all the materials and the resources that we produce on a consistent basis accessible to our own language. So if we are writing blog posts in English, let's write a translation of the blog post or our websites or articles or tutorials or workshops. So intentionality is key, very important here. And collaboration, since we are in a world of open source, this is very natural for us. And this is something that also needs to be done. So on that note, I would like to pass the virtual microphone to Anelda.
Thank you very much, Nana, and all our previous speakers in the team. So at this stage, you've learned about our original idea and what we were able to do through the afrimapr project. You've met some of our community members, and you've heard about challenges and opportunities they've encountered and we have encountered. You've also learned about ways in which we try to address the needs of our community in terms of developing training materials and approaches, and training approaches. So in preparation for this talk, it was smooth sailing to get to this point. The big question was, what do we want to leave you with today? What did we learn from this project? From putting together this presentation? And again, I can't thank the organizers and sponsors and the people who recommended us to the organizers enough for this opportunity, because it really forced us to stop and think about where we are, what we've learned, and where we should go next. We don't have the answers to all of that, but we share what we know with you here today, and we hope this will open new conversations about supporting folks in emerging communities, especially where the contexts are very different from those in established communities. So as you will recall, based on our knowledge about what one can do with R to support routine public health work, especially around the use of data and visualizations, we set out to develop building blocks and learning resources with African data sets to facilitate this process locally. We were also going to offer opportunities for our community of users and contributors to get together and grow their skills and networks, specifically using R in a mapping context and African data. Our original ideas seem very plausible because we know R is becoming more popular in government, industry, and academia across the continent. And the proof of this is the proliferation of R user groups and R ladies communities locally. But when we started to put our project plan into action, we realized that our assumptions about how active and established the African R community actually was way off. This incorrect assumption, coupled with the pandemic's associated restrictions on connecting with our intended audiences, meant some of the work that we wanted to do and still want to do has been deprioritized. We immediately kicked off with a bigger focus on finding our audience through creating a Google group and running monthly meetups to get to know our community and find people that could benefit and contribute to our project. And although we've enjoyed these interactions and people find them valuable, we found that it is still not bringing us closer to what we wanted to accomplish with the original project plan of afrimapr. So we were wondering how we could understand what we were seeing in the community and thought to look at the distribution size and activities of our user groups and our ladies communities to see if there were any answers there. And I just want to say that I realize there are other communities that also provide R capacity and community development support on the continent and elsewhere. But finding and including those in our analysis would be much more difficult. So we stuck to our user groups and our ladies because I do think it does represent some of the story. On these slides, on the next 3 slides, the reddish color refers to active groups, which means they have run at least one event in 2022, while the grayish groups are that have not yet run an event in 2022. We include what we call here inactive groups because several of them have run a large number of events in the past, which means they have already played and may still be playing a role in supporting capacity and community development, knowledge sharing, and more. Even if they're not currently actively running activities, there may be other communication or networking going on that is just not visible on the meetup platforms. And of course, we also understand that COVID has had a large effect on how communities operate and specifically on community leadership. And by calling these communities inactive, we don't want people who are leaders in these communities to feel that I don't want them to feel bad. We just wanted to see what is currently happening in the space. So despite the proliferation of these groups in places like North America, South America, and Europe, only 15 out of 54 countries in Africa have either an R user group or an R ladies community, and some have both, and some have multiple of those, with a total of 26 groups on the continent. And of these 26 groups, only 14 has run events in 2022. So how does the number of groups translate to the number of community members? And here you can see that there are almost 6 times as many community members in North America than in Africa, which has a large impact on how knowledge is shared, what knowledge is shared, where you will find others, how isolated any given R user is, and many, many other factors. The final statistic I want to show you today is the number of R community-led events that have run in Africa versus North America. And again, I acknowledge that there are numerous other groups and communities who are providing R capacity and community development on both continents. And these numbers do not tell the whole story. But I think what's important to see here is that there is almost an order of magnitude difference between the number of events that have been run in the 2 regions. And if you add to this cultural differences, language diversity, and infrastructural challenges, one can recognize that current solutions and approaches for growing community and capacity in one region simply can't be applied directly to another region and expecting the same outcomes. If we look at what it takes to build communities of practice, the work from the Center of Scientific Collaboration and Community Engagement in the US offers great insight through their Community Managers Skills Wheel. A wide range of skills and resources are necessary to build sustainable communities. And I've shared the links here. All the resources are available under Creative Commons license if you wanted to explore this a little bit more. But as you can see here, there are skills ranging from communication skills to technical skills, interpersonal relationship management, program management, and even program development that are employed when you are building communities. Not only do you need a wide range of skills, you also need persistence and commitment and perseverance over several years for communities to really become sustainable. In many communities, the approaches to community engagement and training also have added burdens or extra work. For example, I came across this beautiful example of the Bauchi R user group in Nigeria, which will be offering a 6-week study jam in their local language of Hausa. And we're not even talking about French or Spanish here. I just thought this was such a good example of what the lengths people are going to grow their R skills and their communities. So with the help of R Forwards, a WhatsApp group for our community leaders in Africa was recently established. And I used this forum to get some data on their experiences as community managers. Nobody who responded to the poll is receiving financial support for the work they are doing. And almost everyone agreed that their communities have suffered when they got too busy at work or in their personal lives to continue to provide opportunities to connect. And of course, COVID have played a major role here as well. Despite numerous wonderful funding opportunities to run events, large and small, very few opportunities exist that fund people's time to coordinate these events or to keep the momentum going with communities between events. And it was interesting to see in the presentation by Guillaume de Sachi from AstraZeneca on Tuesday in the Use R 2022 session on building the R community, that he highlighted cadence as a really important part of being able to build a successful community. And that is to keep a rhythm so that the community members know what to expect. But not only to keep a rhythm, also to offer events that cater to different skills and interests. But the question is, how feasible is that if communities are only supported through volunteer efforts? Another talk by my colleagues from the R Ladies Nairobi team spoke about the challenges they experienced in building their community over the past few years. Njoki Lucy specifically referred to the impact on the mental well-being of community leaders when you're working really hard to support a community and participation rates are low, or there are gaps in activities due to other responsibilities. And that is something that is increasingly coming up again in conversations amongst volunteer community leaders. It really takes a toll on people's mental health, especially when things are not working according to the amount of effort that you're putting in. So I think to pull it all together, we want to open conversations around 6 ideas. For the African R community, remember to look as much inward as outward. Support your novice R programmers who don't yet have international networks where they can find help. Think about how you can collaborate internationally and locally. There's much to learn in our communities, skills and approaches that are often more considerate of our context. And don't be afraid to try something new. Learn what works internationally and adapt it to work for you. And then share what you've learned. Everyone will benefit. This is what open source, open science, and open collaboration are all about. For the global community, funders, and established groups who want to collaborate and support the growth of our communities across the globe, let's see if we can find ways to compensate people for their time when there are grants available to run events. There are ways to think about projects, tools, and learning resources that can make it more accessible across languages by being intentional about design and technology. And we've got such fantastically technically skilled people in our communities. How can we do better? And finally, there are people with wonderful ideas and experience who could be very valuable partners to develop and run local community and capacity initiatives. Please take some time to listen to their ideas and experiences. We're grateful to everyone who cares about diversity and inclusion in the R world and look forward to working with you to have an even bigger impact, one R script at a time. I'd like to acknowledge all the team members from afrimapr who have worked in different ways on the project, helping to develop tools, develop the program, introducing us to people, helping us to come up with use cases, working on the book together, working on the development of packages together. I also want to acknowledge our funders. Almost all the work that has been done through afrimapr has been funded through one way or another by the Wellcome Trust. And again, thank you to Oracle who sponsored our keynote. And then finally, at the end of the slides, we do have, as I mentioned before, speaker bios and contact details for everyone. Dr. Andy South, I'd like to acknowledge all of my co-speakers again. Clinton Kolokosa, Dr. Anne Treasure, Dr. Ghislaine Nono-Guye, and of course me. And we want to thank you for your time and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We do have a number of questions, which I'm going to read aloud, both for the benefit of the recording and for accessibility. And starting with the first one from Dale Human. How did you identify people that would benefit from participating in these workshops, assuming a large population that may have never heard of R or what to do with it, as in my organization, smiley face? Were they pulled from schools or public invitations? Just curious on how to maximize participation in such tutorials and workshops.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good question. And I can maybe speak a little bit about that. I don't know if any of the colleagues have anything to add. All the people who were part of the original afrimapr team have quite large R networks, I would say, and many of them had also worked with or in Africa for some of their research life. I've also been working in Africa in data science spaces for about 7-8 years. So we used our networks to advertise these events, and we used the R networks, R ladies, user groups, various of the Twitter handles and Twitter hashtags to make sure that news was spread about the opportunity. We were also very well received by the international community, and the work that we've done have been broadcasted far and wide. So we thank the international community, especially people in the geospatial side, for telling others about the work that we are doing. So we've never had a shortage of participants. Well, for the 2 or 3 workshops that we ran, we had oversubscription, I would say. For the one workshop, I think in Kenya, we had, I would lie but I think 100 people signing up, and we were dead scared. But sometimes, luckily, everyone doesn't show up, right? So a lot of marketing through other communities, and also from the start, we tried to collaborate with other communities so that we weren't yet another silo, but that we were part of a range of opportunities on the geospatial and our horizon that people could pick and choose from. But yes, we found many people who are very, very, very new to R. I think the word is just really spreading. So it's not hard to find people who want to participate in our workshops.
The next question comes from Patrice Godard, who asks, do you know if there are any similar initiatives, which is very cool, related to other programming languages or statistical environments? Working with other initiatives with similar goals but different approaches could increase the impacts of all the projects. Many thanks for this inspiring presentation.
So do anyone else want to take this?
I'm not aware of any similar ones in other programming languages. I'm not sure if anyone else is.
I think we are mainly R people, and we are not really well aware of anything that is happening outside the R space. But I would say that even the people in using other programming languages or statistical environments, they always have one good thing to say about R, that's the community. And I think the community around R is definitely one of its greatest strengths. Of course, besides R being a very powerful statistical and data analysis language.
I can say that we continue to keep, so all of us work across many projects and communities. And in my own work, for example, I'm involved in a national project in South Africa where we working with humanities and social sciences scholars to try and build a community of practice around the use of digital and computational tools and methodologies within humanities and social sciences. And as part of that, we also bring in R, Python, and other tools that are related to the digital humanities and computational social sciences. So there's a lot of cross-fertilization between communities. We're also involved, not very involved at the moment, but hoping to be more involved soon with projects like Code for Africa, which is a fantastic initiative. They run training and community of practice for data-driven journalism in Africa and fact-checking and misinformation combating. So there's a lot of initiatives that are not necessarily looking at geospatial, but across different technologies and applications. And then there are organizations or groups like African Women in GIS and they sub-chapters as well. There's also the Youth Mappers, which is from the OpenStreetMaps. So we try and keep an eye on other things that does something similar and try and learn from them and try and also partner where possible to share our opportunities with them and share their opportunities within our community. So I hope that answers that question a little bit.
The next question comes from Stephen Balagoon, who I believe is based in Nigeria. He's to use our chair arranger, by the way. We thank him for all his extremely hard work helping putting this together. And he asks, could the difference in uptake and utilization of R be related to the paucity of opportunities with R compared to other apps, and maybe poor diffusion through schools?
I'd like to say something about the diffusion through schools argument here. So R is actually very prominent in schools. However, you will see R mainly in very technical fields like statistics and mathematics. These are the departments or programs where R is usually taught when it comes to schools, especially universities. And so I would say, you said poor diffusion. So my interpretation of the word poor here would not be in the quality of the way R is being taught, but I would say that I would interpret poor as a lack of, visibility of the scope of R, essentially, because people who learn R through school only know R as a language that can only do regression analysis, making bar charts and, doing a little bit of econometrics. But then when you show them a dashboard or you show them a map that is made with R, then they are really, really surprised that R can do something like that, or you can make a website or anything like that. So again, I agree with you on the term poor diffusion through school, but then my interpretation is very specific. They don't really show the students everything that R can do. It is really a very focused view of R that is being taught. And this definitely can also account for the fact that R is not as widespread as Python, which is a language that people know all the facets of, right from the get.
I think if I can add to that, in many of the communities that we have run, for example, some of the people in this audience may also be familiar with the Carpentries, who runs. It's a nonprofit organization that runs global workshops globally in research, data science, tools like R and Python and others. And we've been involved in running those types of workshops in Africa since 2014. And we find very, very often, as Nana is saying, that outside of the statistics classroom, people have never heard of R and they have never heard of Python. And they are bombarded by licensed tools. And often there are great benefits to buying licenses for tools for people in the universities. But also, people are not aware of how incredibly accessible and open R and Python is, and the unbelievable opportunities it makes available, because they're so familiar with licensed tools. And the value of R and Python is it's a culture that is not familiar in a world where you have to pay for everything, even your own journal article after you've written it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the whole open science, open source reality hasn't yet taken root enough in South African or in African universities on the whole. Of course, there are departments and faculties where it's more common, but on a whole, I think there's not enough marketing and showcasing of what it means to be part of an open science, open source community and using open source tools that are free.
Thank you.
On that, I think the misconception or the thinking that commercial softwares are the best is what is also hindering some of the uptake or use of our software. For example, I remember in my undergrad, I didn't have any chance to use open source softwares. So the preference was on commercial softwares. And it's when later I graduated that I realized that free is not always cheap. Yeah.
Susan Gichuki offers both a comment and a question. Her comment is, I think having multiple organizers in community groups to rotate and or share tasks might help in preventing organizers getting burned out. And then her question is, has the afrimapr team thought about developing tutorials in other languages used in Africa, such as Swahili, widely spoken in several East African countries?
We really boasted about the fact that we did something in French, but the reality is we did something in French once. And we only did it because Nono kindly offered his time to translate it. We don't have a process or resources to do more. So we have this beautiful flagship project and nothing more. But it's available and it's open and it's there and it's maintained and it can still run. But going into other languages, we simply don't have the resources. And at the moment, we don't have enough of a community who are making use of our resources to justify translating into more languages. And now that's, again, the chicken and the egg situation. If we had it in Swahili, would Swahili speakers use it? I don't know. We have it in French. How many French speakers are using it? So I think for us, our biggest challenge has still been around finding a community where there's enough people who are more fluent in R to be able to contribute and reuse the resources, and new people who wants to learn at a certain level. And that will take time and more effort to grow that community.
It's finding
And
that.
of course,
Sorry, no.
sorry. Now, of course, events like this really helps to get the word out about the resources that are available, and finding more community members who can take up the resources that are there and give feedback and more so on. Thanks, Anne.
No, I was just adding, to what you're saying, just the challenge of building that community and in different languages. Yeah, it's translating, but then it's also finding kind of trainers and instructors who can then instruct in that language. So it's quite a big task to take on in building communities in other languages. But something we would really like to do. But it is a challenge.
If I could respond to the comment, sorry, I've forgotten the person who asked the question and made the comment now, that yes, absolutely. As I was thinking about what we're seeing, especially not only in the afrimapr community, but across the communities that we're involved in, which includes the research software engineering group in Africa, this project that I was talking about digital humanities and computational social sciences in South Africa, afrimapr, the Open Life Science project, the carpentries. I was wondering if we understand what the impact of COVID and going virtual really has had on how 2 years ago we thought about building communities, because suddenly there is a wealth of online opportunities, many of them for free, many of them from outstanding speakers and trainers across the globe. Is it really sensible to continue doing things the way we did 2 years ago, when there wasn't all that much available online, and you relied more on in-person small events where you can have a coffee or a beer together and meet people in person, which I think I would love to still have happen, but at the same time, there's all these opportunities online. Does it really make sense for each one of these Our Ladies communities to have to run a monthly event? Or can we just team up and take that burden off every single community manager until we have a bigger community that can sustain itself and can start splitting up into smaller groups? But is it really worthwhile to encourage every single Our Ladies organizer to organize a monthly or twice a monthly event? And I don't think it is. Like, there are so much happening. How can we tap into what is happening, not only taking but also contributing? And all these talks are being recorded. It's all online. How can we use these resources and people's time better than what we are doing? Because I think we're still trying to do what we did 2 years ago, but so much has changed.
Yeah, and I'd like to add something to that, especially about the Swahili, the translation of Swahili question. One of my calls to action was collaboration. So Anelda pointed to the fact that there's lack of funding for things like that, and sometimes we don't even have the basis to justify an investment. But with collaboration, which is, as I mentioned, natural in open source work, all these things can actually be achieved. So to the person who asked the question, if you can speak Swahili and English very fluently, and if you are in a community of our users who can speak the two languages, maybe that's a very interesting project. And I'm pretty sure that Swahili is definitely a blue ocean too when it comes to our materials.
Mm.
This leads nicely into what I think will be our final question from Arthur Shaw. Have you faced a challenge of finding would-be participants that have strong interest but not the required R knowledge to participate meaningfully? If so, how have you handled that? In particular, are there any initiatives like afrimapr that target Africa, but with an eye to developing basic R skills, in effect an on-ramp for thematic initiatives like afrimapr?
I can perhaps take the first part of that. So for example, in our Use R tutorial last year, we did have the situation, so we sent out that pre-course survey I was talking about, just so that we could find out more about our audience. So basically just, you need to know your audience. So we knew that we were dealing with skill levels that went from complete beginner, never having used R, to experienced. And I mean, that's really tricky to work with in a workshop or tutorial. So you just have to at least know that. So sort of as how you approach your teaching, you have to find that, that line of explaining enough, for the beginners to understand, but not so the advanced people kind of drop off and get bored. And finding that line is quite difficult. But we also had breakout rooms where people could go to for more focused help, where our helpers could then go and sort of, answer their questions or give them more focused help. And we also had places where they could ask questions. And also, because our materials are downloadable and completely open source, we're always happy to be contacted afterwards if they want to ask us questions and work through the materials. We've also got the community meetups that Anelda mentioned that people can come to once a month and can chat to us and ask questions. I don't know if anyone else has got anything else to add to that. But it's tricky. I mean, it is tricky trying to deal with that. But we do with our tutorials as well. We do the Learn R online tutorials. They do kind of work from the point of people not necessarily needing to have a lot of R knowledge to get going with them. Andy designed those tutorials in a really beautiful way that you can just kind of launch into them and just learn about mapping without having to be an R guru, basically.
Oh, I was busy typing an answer just to share some links as well, but I don't know, it disappeared. Thank you very much for these questions. Sorry, I haven't thanked any of the people who's asked questions. It's all fantastic questions and really things that we are thinking about and that we don't necessarily have answers for. In terms of people who are offering foundational, so as Anne says, all the time, we got the appetite for learning R is tremendous. The ability to take someone with no programming experience who are isolated in an environment where they don't have mentors or seniors or role models who are using these tools, take them from zero and get them to actually start using R in their work. It is another challenge that we can speak about on another day, but there are communities who work on this. And I can specifically mention, for example, the work that we've been doing with the carpentries as well. We've run, and now to date, the community has run, I would lie if I had to say, but we've reached thousands of learners through carpentries workshops across many countries, including Ethiopia, Gabon, and Mauritius, Botswana, Namibia. But those workshops are 2 days, and they're really lovely in the workshop. But after the workshop, for people to continue learning these skills when there is nothing around them, when there isn't a community around them, when their supervisors haven't used R, when their peers aren't involved in projects that uses R, and when they have no programming background, it's a really big effort that we need. And so there's also the subject specific communities that teaches foundational aspects of R, like the bioinformatics communities, very big growth in bioinformatics. The astronomy also big, but not so much focused on R, but at least Python programming and data science skills. And then, as I mentioned, Code for Africa, there are organizations, non-profit communities like She Code Africa, and a variety of others that are working on different levels of learning to code and learning to code in R.
So we have less than 4 left. So I'm going to read aloud the last question, but I'm going to suggest that it be discussed elsewhere because it is from Devor Pranjik. What is your most pressing need and how could it be meaningfully answered? And I don't think you can answer that in less than 20 seconds. So I invite you all to continue these conversations in the lounges and online and elsewhere. This has been a wonderful gathering. Thank you, Anelda and Nono and Clinton and Anne and Andy in absentia. Thank you again to Oracle. Thank you to all of you who attended today. There are some lovely comments in the chat, and we'll see you at the other sessions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone, and thank you very much for the conversation. We're looking forward to continuing the conversation.